back everyone after our summer break. And today, just to have a rather light theme to kick off the new season, I want to talk about Kantei, about how to judge a Japanese blade, but not in the usual way, is it if you see X and it is Y. I just want to give you, like, from a personal experience, some tricks and tips about how to look at a Japanese sword and how you might detect those things and what there is to see. So when it comes to judging and dating Japanese swords, we have like one major challenge, and that's that the sword fashion actually did not change that much over a period of 1,000 years. It's not like Europe. We have several regional styles, and swords drastically change every couple of 100 years. In Japan, from Heian to now, to say it bluntly, the swords look pretty much the same for someone who is not familiar. It's a curved single-edged blade with a tip. But there are subtle differences, of course. And what I would like to do and what I recommend is, you don't have to learn all the Japanese terms by heart. They're helpful later on when you get more advanced, but just focus on the main aspects like taper, curvature, the tip. Let's move on. So before we go a little bit into detail, I just want to say there's basically 3 types of Kantei. The first Kantei is the full Kantei as an appraisal. You want to know who made the blade, you want to attribute it to a maker. This would also include to judge the tang. You see if it's signed and if the signatures are authentic. So there's the whole full Kantei. And there's another type of Kantei, which is the Newsatz Kantei, which is the one that does not show the tang. There's the hilt down, and you gonna try to guess who the maker is. So there are blades for Newsatz Kantei. You pick them up, you come up with an idea about the maker, then you fill out a little sheet of paper and give it to the person who leads the Kantei, and he gonna answers to you, you're close or you're far off. And that's how it's basically an educational tool or a competition, and there are contests, of course. So that's the second for the Newsatz Kantei. And then there's a third form of Kantei, which some of us also participate in, and that's the Shicho Kantei in a magazine. So you have an Oshigata and you have a description, and then you have to find out who the maker is. And I'm going to talk about this, the difficulties and the challenges with the Shicho Kantei at the end of this very brief talk. So, we all know these pictures. This picture is in so many books, the changes of the Japanese sword. But what I do not like is, I know what they are trying to do. You can see here the switch between tachi and katana, which happened around 1600, it's a very rough estimate. But it's not how it works in the real life, because the blades are laid out, always the cutting edge to the left, and your brain doesn't flip around just because it's going to be 1600 at some point. So what I do like, I try to reverse kind of the left side of this picture. When you see this, as mentioned, for an outsider or for a beginner, those blades can be very, very similar. They're just curved blades with the cutting edge and the tip. And I'm going to address those subtle differences in a little. But what you can see here, it's very important, there are certain waves of changes. You can see blades gonna curve a little, then I curve a little less again, then I gotta grow in size. There are certain waves which allow us to narrow down their dates. As you can see here, it's very rough from 700 all the way to now. So, what's the checklist to do when you look at the blade in terms of shape? And I have to admit, I'm a shape person. So there are people who judge a sword and know immediately what it is just looking at the steel. There are some people who just focus on the Hamon, but I personally am a shape person. I like to look at the subtleties of shape, which tells us a lot about the age and the period of when the sword made. Regardless if they were later, all shapes were constantly copied. So people in Shinshin to try to make Kamakura blades, but there are subtle changes in the shape that allow you to narrow down when they were really made. So first thing is, when you pick it up, first overall impression, is it slender or is it magnificent? Does it feel light? Is it tapering? It also already tells you a lot. If you have a massive blade, you immediately go 3 directions, Nambokcho, Momoyama, or Shinshinto. It's like this thing from the first time you pick up a blade, see is it slender, graceful, or magnificent and powerful. That already tells you a lot. As I said, the taper. Look at the taper. Is it thinning down towards the tip a lot, or is the width basically the same over the entire sword? Also tells you a lot. As mentioned, this is not gonna be a lecture today where I tell you why Moto Haba speak for this school. I just like to tell you about what to look for, just as a tool to come up with your own Kantei. Look at the curvature, where again you don't have to memorize all these terms like Koshisori, Tori-sori, Wa-sori, Saki-sori. Just see where is the center of the curvature. Does it curve right out of the hilt like this, or is it very smooth, or does it curve at all? Tells you a lot about the production time. And look at the tip. Is it a massive tip? Is it a small tip? Is it pretty small tip? And there are some other things I'm going to point out. This is where the homework comes into play. So you have to there's a certain homework. You have to look up when these changes happen over time in shape, what periods there are, but they can be looked up pretty easily in the books. Just today I want to focus to show you what are the major factors you have to concentrate on to judge a blade. And what is the other parts of judging a shape? For example, look at the thickness. Turn the blade on the mune on the back side and see if it's thick. Is also the thickness tapering, which was more common in certain periods. Some like Nambokcho blades, they can be thinner. Is it very massive? Could it be a Shinshinto blade? Things like this. Also, don't forget to look at the thickness, the kasane, when you turn it on your back. Then look at the width of the shinogichi, also important. Comes it close to the width of the cutting edge side, or is it very narrow? It can also tell you a lot about where you are in time and province. And look at the height of the shinogi. Try to look at the cross section. Is it very like diamond shaped, or is it very flat with almost the sides parallel? Also tells you a lot. So you have to turn around the blade, look at all of the whole 3-dimensionality of and look at the back, look at the cross section, and some other things. Are there indicators of a blade being unaltered, ubu, or shortened? So what I always do, first check, see if there's ubuha. If the part at the hamachi is not sharpened, then you can assume the blade is not very old. It haven't seen that many polishes. I was once at an NYTK meeting 20 years ago. There was a massive blade with ubuha. Everyone was Kanteiing to Shinshinto, Satsuma Shinshinto or Sayuki Hide. It was actually a Nambokcho blade that haven't seen many polishes. Stokube Tsuchuyo was at the NYTK, and everyone got it wrong. So if there's very rare examples where an old blade has ubuha, but if you see ubuha, don't try to go even for Shinto. Stay with Shinshinto or even later. Then, if you do like the full Kantei with the hilt off, look at the thickness of the tang and how it looks different than the thickness of the blade, like circled in here. Does the blade have seen a lot of material loss through polishes? A koto blade, anything before 1600, likely has a thinner blade than the tang. So keep this in mind. Always look at it, if you can, look at the tang and see how much material it has lost. Also at the machi, is the machi very narrow? And has lost some material along the cutting edge side. So those are all these factors you can look at the shape, and then you just have to hit the books at home and see at which period the shapes look like, which way. So the next thing is of course the steel. It's the very traditional type of Kantei, the procedure. Look at the shape for the production time, you look at the steel for the region, and then you look at the Hamon for the school or the maker. So that's just a traditional way, and it has proven very effective. So the next part is the steel. And crucial for steel, it's very dependent on polish and light. If the blade is in a bad polish, or it's still oil on it, or the light is sufficient, you probably, at some point you can already stop there because you can't see anything, and it's very hard to figure it out, except for what you have seen in the shape. So in the ideal case, the polish is good and the light is good. For the lighting of the steel, sometimes it's recommended to look at it at daylight or the light coming from behind. It's a different light source than looking at the Hamon. So the next thing, try to ignore the Hamon. If you look at the Chicane, the steel, I know it can be very distracting. Your eyes are always going to monitor the Hamon, but just try to look more towards the Shinogi and to really focus on the steel. Try to see how many forging structures you can detect. Is there itame or mokume? Can you even see masame or nagare? Just not focus on one area and say, oh, there's some itame, so it's ko-itame, and then you go over to the Hamon. Just take your time and look at the entire blade and see of how many forging structures you can find. And then see the degree of uniformity. Is there some rougher areas at the base? Is it all very uniformly, tightly forged? Is there a difference on both sides? Can the difference go back to material loss? That the core steel is coming through. Blades are getting rougher. So just try to see how uniform the whole forging is. The more uniform, the better, but it also depends on school. Some schools made very wild forging structures. This was just their trade. So that's where you have to hit the books and do the homework. But just look and try to see how uniform the steel is forged. And also is how spot utsuri. Utsuri is not easy to see sometimes, especially if the light is bad and the polish is bad. But what I always do is, don't get too close with your eyes. Hold the blade at a certain distance and try almost like with the tip forward, with the cutting edge down, and rotate it a little bit like this, and focus your eyes, focus more like towards the Shinogi, not towards the Hamon. And if you look at the Shinogi and look down the tip and like hold it far away as possible and rotate it with the cutting edge down, you should be able to see utsuri if it's there, of course, and if the blade is polished. Yeah?
Can you describe what that is? I don't know what that is.
So utsuri is over the Hamon. There can be an appearance of a certain reflection. It can be almost look like a second Hamon. It's like whitish structure, yeah. So it's often hard to see. So focus with the eyes along the Shinogi towards the tip and hold the blade as far away as possible. Because sometimes you can see the utsuri before you go to the table, and then you pick the blade up and you can't see the utsuri anymore. So that's also one way to see. And the third part, of course, is the Hamon. As mentioned, some people are Hamon persons. They look immediately Hamon and say, yeah, this is Yamasuke Kane, or this is Yamato Shizu. So it's even more dependent on the polish and the light. Sometimes you really can't see much on a blade, and you just have to stop. You can probably say the shape suggests it's late Koto or Kamakura, but if the polish and the light is not there, you can't make any too wild guesses. Also, first thing I do, try to assess the Niue Gucci. Try really actively see if you can see the Niue Gucci. Is it like a very thin line? Is it very thin and goes along all the cutting edge, or is it wide, or is it even difficult to make out the transition between the Hamon and the chi, the steel? So focus on the Shinogi chi, on the Niue Gucci, I mean, and see if you can make it out. Actively try to follow the Niue Gucci. The next thing is, again, try to detect as many shapes and activities as you can, and try to internally say them to yourself. Like I always try to say, okay, I can see chochi, I can see gonome, I can see notare and sunagashi. Just don't stop too early. Take your time. I know the new sets of Kantei you already have for 1 minute or two, but you can take several turns. But if you have the time, take the time and try to detect as much as you can. Sometimes there's not much there. There's a suguha with a thin Niue Gucci, and that's it. But look at both sides and try to detect all the shapes that are there that you can. And also try to evaluate the degree of naturalness. I have put this in quotation marks. It's kind of difficult to define term. Try to find out, is this something natural that was done through trial and error, that was handed down for generations, or is this something that was very deliberately applied to Hamon? Is this something that looks like stiff, or is it trying to recreate something? It just looks over the top more than the original. You know, if you have like a Bisen Ichimonji Choji, which is soft with a soft Nyoeguchi, and then you can see something which looks like an extreme version of that, it might give you an idea that's a later, early Edo Ishido school, or even again Daito. Just try. This only comes after a while, so this is very difficult if you're a beginner to see, oh, that's a natural Hamon or that's an affected one. That's what I try to say. Like, we have a Koto blade and a Shinto blade. There are 5,000 exceptions, of course, to everything, but by trend, look at the natural start of, this blade is shortened, but there should be like a natural start of the Hamon and the Koto blade, and there's more like a natural continuation into the Boshi. In many Shinto blades, there is a harsh, a prominent start, then you have all the blade as a canvas, and then the Boshi looks different. So this is, as mentioned, the Smiths saw the part of the blade as a canvas to put their style of Hamon on, and the Boshi is clearly separate as a contrasting point. So this also can tell you sometimes if a blade is Koto or Shinto. And then of course again, you have to learn all the subtle differences. It just comes over the years. You can't memorize all the schools and traits. That's a difficult part. But if you do it for some years, it can be done. It's not witchcraft. So, and then I want to conclude by, there are certain things that you have to look out when you do this on a magazine, because it has to be a text and a Moshigata. What you do, you have to read carefully, of course. Don't just read the whole thing maybe twice or 3 times and let it sink in. Does it sound like a description for a Koto blade, or does it more sound like, when they speak like a fresh look and everything's bright, what does it tell you? And also try to read between the lines and see what is not mentioned. If there is no mention of an utsuri, then there is likely no utsuri there. Don't try to focus on the school that is famous for utsuri. If it's done properly, like by the NYTK every month, if there's an utsuri, they're gonna mention there's utsuri. They're not gonna trick you by leaving it out. So also try to see what is not there. And also look for, I call it trigger words or wordings. So if they say the Chigane or Chihara is a koitame, and then they say something like it stands out in a unique or a characteristic manner, then they have to like pause, because that tells you it's not a run-of-the-mill koitame or appearance. It must be something that is unique. So what could it be? It could be Nashichi, it could be Konuka. So those are the things what they say. There's some characteristicness in the steel. And they're also gonna give you tips of the tang finish too. So pay attention if there's some trigger words like characteristic steel, then you have to figure out, this must be a school that's famous for something unique. And also another important factor, which is very much, everyone has experienced by us, it's just the mood and state of mind on a particular day. Sometimes you're just tired and you can look at 5 plates and you have no idea who the maker is. And sometimes you're just very crisp and awake, just had an espresso, and then you can't do everything Atari correct. But more often, after a week of work, you look at the plate and say, I have to drop the towel, I have no idea. It looks like Koto. So just for today, I wanted to give you all a very light refresher about the Kantei, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Markus, how do you approach blades that were shortened, shoriage blades, in terms of dating?
First, you have to see how the widening goes to the habaki, towards the blades, towards the base of the blade. If the blade, you notice it's widening a little more than it does before. It's very subtle. Then probably it's fumbari. That might suggest original. But also try to see what you can detect in the shape. if you see the curvature, everything points towards Kamakura, but the blade is really short. You say that might actually be a shortened Kamakura blade. So you have to put all this into context to see if the blade looks old, if the upper part suggests Kamakura, then you rather assume it's shortened in some point, or go another route that's a later piece that just tries to copy a shortened blade. So that's the subtleness. But try to figure out, is there some noticeable widening towards the habaki? If you can see that, then it's probably very slightly suriage or ubu.
Thank you.
Is it a different approach to tanto? Between katanas and tantos?
It's basically the same approach. They just have different characteristics, but you just have to learn the changes in shape. But it's the same way I look at them. And I always look, when you pick up the blade first, I always look at all sides, you know. Look at the shape and the curvature, look at the back, turn it around one more time, and also look if there's ubuha.
It's tanto because of its construction, you know, so it's single steel plate.
Yeah.
They made them throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
When you try to Kantei, you know, I mean, it could be more difficult than to katanas that
Yeah.
are most pronounced and
but it's the same approach. You can see how uniform the steel is and what you can see. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I see in the answers to the Kantei,
Mm-hmm.
this is mostly from Yoshikawa stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is they talk about sometimes quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that if we pay more attention, if we can learn about quality, we can Kantei more easily
Mm-hmm.
by saying this is a high quality blade,
Right.
there's a smaller group.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to look for quality.
Oh yeah, that's true. If you see how uniform everything is, how bright the Hamon can be, then you can already make judgments, which this comes over the years. So, but it's true. And if they mention something in the magazine that the steel is particularly bright and that the chiba, both chi and ha, that both is bright, it gives you an idea about the quality. And there are, as Larry says, there are rankings of quality. Sometimes, or very often, when you read through Homer's appraisal diaries, he says, yeah, the Hamon and everything looks like this Smith, but the quality is just one rank below, and that's how that traditional way to attribute it to someone else, rather than what it's supposed to be. Mhm.
Markus, you used the term magnificent for the shape.
Yeah.
What is a magnificent shape blade?
So I would say a very powerful masculine, what they also say in Japan, masculine shape. It's just a powerful shape. Wide, little taper, maybe a bigger tip. That's what I say. Yeah, as contrast to slender. Check.
I have a question coming from a fittings guy.
Mm-hmm.
So take it, with a grain of salt. The difference between the A and the OA base blade. Now, I've had very experienced collectors argue. Can you give a generic discussion on how you attribute something to A versus new?
If you look at the habuchi, the nyoeguchi that separates the ha from the chi, if you can see particles, it's nie. If you can't see anything, it's just misty and white, it's nioe. And then you just have to know which schools have rougher nie, smaller nie, how many nie. But usually if you look at the habuchi and you see crystals, then it's nioe already.
How do they make either or?
It's
specific schools who prefer one or the other.
Yeah.
How do they?
It depends on one part to the carbon content of the steel, and on the other part to the temperature when it's hardened. Because if you heat it up to a higher degree and quench it in water, there's a different reaction about how the structure of the steel reacts with quenching. So if the temperature is higher and you quench it, it forms larger crystals. So you'll be more likely to see nie. So different schools have a different approach in hardening.
But also when you, let's say, that goes through many polishes over the years. Can the polish brings more of it? Like just, by exposing, losing one of the steel and bringing the harder one towards the face, in other words, widen it. You're gonna getting up when you're polishing, let's say that ear was kind of like skinnier, let's call it.
Yeah, but
But then throughout the polishing, you're exposing it from inside out.
I would say it's the other way around because it's more like a hardening effect. It doesn't go very deep.
Okay.
So you can rather polish knee out than resurfing it from the inside.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
So when there are descriptions, like in the Shisho Kantei, they talk
Mhm.
about having a tight Niueguchi,
Yeah.
are they also, is that another way of saying it's Nie based, or can you have Nioi based and also have a tight
You
Niueguchi?
can have a very tight knee based. It's just the width. If you draw it with a pencil and it lights up like a light bulb, it's very thin light. That's what I mean with a tight Niueguchi.
So what role, if any, should looking at an Ana play in Kantei? The hole and the Nakugo?
One more time.
So should we evaluate the Ana, the hole in the Nakugo at all? Does that play any role in Kantei, or can that
Oh yeah,
help us to-
if you do a full Kantei, you're gonna see how was the roll, the Mekugi Ana done. Was it like punched? Was it punched more diagonally, or very neatly, like later in Shinshinto? Also, look at the position. There's a difference between a katana and a tachi, where how deep, how low it is on the tang, and also see if you can see what would be the right English word for burr around it. If you can still see some burr, it's not going to be probably anything earlier than Shinto. So also look around the Mekugi Ana. It was freshly drilled, and just the larger early Koto Mekugi Ana, they are very archaic. So you can see they were punched. They are not super straight. They're not supposed to be straight because the Mekugi is at a certain angle to hold the hilt more effectively than just going out straight. Okay, thank you very much.
And